Hello and welcome to my review of Philip Pullman's Northern Lights, the first book in the His Dark Materials series. Northern Lights was published in 1995, meaning I'm just a millennial's lifetime behind in actually getting around to reading it. The plot follows Lyra, a little girl apparently orphaned and raised in a rather haphazard fashion by the scholars at a university. She is taken from there by both a female carer, Mrs. Coulter, and by the absence of her actual guardian, Lord Asriel. After discovering the people behind a sinister plot, she is forced to flee to the safety of the Egyptian people, boat-faring traders. From there, she heads north in search of Lord Asriel and a missing friend. The first couple of chapters of Northern Lights are a great indicator in what's to come. The first particularly has everything. Lyra is set up as inquisitive and rebellious, and while exploring the off-limits sections of the university, she hides out in a cupboard and witnesses and foils an assassination attempt on her guardian. With her is her demon, a shape-shifting familiar and constant companion. All humans apparently have them. Pullman's writing is of a far higher standard than what makes up a lot of fantasy these days. So while Lyra's situation is hardly original, it's still an exciting and tense scene that is also full of snippets of world building, a touch of humour to go with the intrigue and drama. We learn a little bit of the relationships between nations, seeds are sown of mysterious dust found in the north that drives much of the plot, and we learn about the infighting between college and church factions. It's a scene rich in both tension and information that needs to be handled adroitly as the book's opener. The demons are the book's most interesting concept. Everyone has one, and they're often a clue to their identity or a window to their thoughts. Unsurprisingly, the symbiotic relationship between them and the humans is a huge part of the book, and for the most part handled in a way that relates the information in a way that doesn't ever feel like exposition. We learn early on through what may or may not be a dream that the connection between human and demon survives death, and then we see the trauma that results from an enforced separation of the two. This scene was the first time I actually felt that the story got a little bit sidetracked, and even then it was a good 2/3 of the way into the book. Lyra leaves the Egyptian caravan that is heading north to rescue Asriel. She leaves them in order to go hunting what she thinks is a ghost. It turns out to be a young boy whose demon has been severed from him. The depiction of the loss and the shock that the boy suffers is okay, accepting that Pullman is walking a tightrope of wanting to write a book that appeals to children and still trying to handle the subject of a child's suffering. But the scene itself felt a little bit like an aside to the adventure rather than part of it. Pullman gets away with it, I think, because the importance of this scene in setting up the stakes for later when the bad guys try and do the same thing to Lyra and her demon, Pantalaimon, the stakes are established in that first scene, and the second becomes more powerful for it. Even so, at the time, it felt a little bit like an unnecessary detour story-wise. It still does, like I say, establish the danger for Lyra very well. Lyra is actually very likeable. As mentioned, she has a habit of getting herself into trouble, par for the course in books of this nature, but she's also brave and resourceful in extricating herself from it again. Her relationship with her demon is obviously key to that, but so is her relationship with Mrs. Coulter. That Lyra is initially awestruck by her is again more effective for the reader because we know the underlying danger that she brings. Again, there is a small aspect here that I didn't think was quite perfect. Her concern for Roger, her missing friend, comes and goes a little bit, but there's no doubt that she's otherwise an excellent protagonist. I particularly enjoyed her manipulation of the Bear King, the seeds of which are planted in that first chapter as well. The tying together of her bravery and her intelligence with the wonderful demons was great. As an English nerd, I enjoyed the depiction of her code switching depending on her company. In fact, it was so unexpected that when it first happened, I went back and read the first chapter again in case I'd missed something. In a moment of doubt, I even thought that Pullman might have added the first chapter later in the writing process. However, as the book develops and you see Lyra doing this easily and often, it's clear that it's deliberate and very skillful. I do have one small concern as well going forward, and that's the future reading machine, the alethiometer, removes some of the danger and some of Lyra's agency. Like I say, she was a great character, but like the machine, the witches insist that our fate is set, and it takes a little bit away from the strength of Lyra, which is the decisions she's made up to that point. Given the strengths of Northern Lights, I am kind of confident that Pullman will handle this well enough going into the sequels, but it's a touch cliched, as well as removing a little bit of Lyra's agency, which was a bit of a shame. Another part that really appealed to my inner nerd were the magnificent Homer-esque similes in the duel between the duped usurper of the armoured bears and the Honourable Irek Brynison. Like two great masses of rock balanced on adjoining peaks and shaken loose by earthquakes that bound down mountainsides, gathering speed, leaping over crevices and knocking trees into splinters until they crash into each other so hard they're smashed to powder and flying chips of stone. That was how the two bears come together. There's another one later on as well that I won't read because it's long as well. I do wonder what somebody who isn't a Homer fanboy might actually make of these. I'd be reluctant to use anything similar if I was writing. Maybe some people might find them cheesy or something, and also they might break the structure or the rhythm you might be trying to maintain in a fight scene. But it's interesting here because they are effectively the bookends of the duel of the bears, so they actually lend it structure. I like I say, I loved them, but I do wonder what other people made of them. Hopefully they felt some of that same intertextuality, the rubbing off of some of that timeless epic of Homer onto Pullman's own work. If Homer can be said to have a peer, it is surely noted science fiction luminary Chuck Wendig. In my review of his risible Aftermath, I had this to say. In the distance, the sound of more fighting, a plume of smoke, flashes of blaster fire. A billboard high up in the sky among the traffic lanes suddenly goes to static. The first line here is overdoing the short punchy sentence to create tension technique. The reason this fails is because this is actually a string of phrases. Now this is common in a screenplay where the intent is to indicate imagery and sound, but we should expect more in the novel form. What's missing here is there isn't actually a single verb. There is nothing happening or being done, so there's no sense of action. The second line flubs the whole thing anyway, and exposes quite simply that Wendig is a poor writer. His inconsistency blows the scene. We have almost the same amount of words in this sentence as in the first one, but without a single piece of punctuation. The juxtaposition of the four fragmented phrases with one lengthy sentence makes the pace uneven. None of it is evocative, imaginative, or does anything interesting anyway, and this is in an action scene no less. So let's look at what Pullman does, also in an action scene. Iron clanged on iron, teeth crashed on teeth, breath roared harshly, feet thundered on hard-packed ground. The snow around was splashed with red and trodden down for yards into a crimson mud. So what we have here is four clauses, not phrases. There's a subject and a verb. There's a thing doing a thing. There's a rigid structure that creates pace. But we also have imaginative uses of the things depicted. There's roaring breath, there's crashing teeth. They set this up as animal and ferocious. Feet thundering, packing the ground evokes the full power of nature, transforming its surroundings. It's epic and it ripples with energy. The second sentence, like in Wendig's example, is much longer than the preceding one. But again, it's two clauses. We have snow is splashed red and then trodden into a crimson mud, which is opposed to Wendig's single clause. Personally, again, I may have left out the conjunction, splitting this into two in favour of trying to maintain something of that established rhythm, though Pullman's lengthy version may well have been an attempt to disrupt that in order to better reflect the staccato nature of any fight. Either way, it shows the difference between Pullman, a more than competent writer, and his less talented peers. In conclusion, I'm rather looking forward to reading on into the series. The ending here being something of a cliffhanger, it is rather inevitable. I rather enjoyed Northern Lights, though. Boasts an engaging lead, an interesting world, and a story full of intrigue and excitement. I would rate it as one of the better modern books that I've read in a long time, if 1995 counts as modern to you, I guess. In terms of audience, it's probably aimed at teens, a touch older than something like John Christopher's Tripod series or the Harry Potter books, but Pullman's prose is effective and superior to most of his peers as shown, making this very much a book that older readers can enjoy as well. In a nutshell, Northern Lights has actually restored some of my faith in contemporary fantasy, for which I'm very grateful. As such, I recommend it to anyone interested in the genre. So thank you for watching my review of Philip Pullman's Northern Lights. If you liked this video, feel free to check out some of the other videos on this channel, and why not consider subscribing and ringing the bell while you're here.